We have an esteemed board member, Don Bird, who was with the Sheriff's Department for 34 years in charge of our county jail. And at his desk, he had a sign up that read, from Dostoevsky, "The degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons." I would love to tell you about Julio. I hope he will tell you about himself, but he's a pretty humble guy. He's got letters behind his name, a huge number of accomplishments, and I encourage you to go on the Exodus Transitional Community, ETC for short, and take a look, because what he's been able to accomplish in criminal justice reform and helping improve prisons and transitioning people out of prisons, especially over the COVID pandemic, is the gold standard. But I want to tell you about my friend. We who are in this business are passionate about it, and my heroes are those who, while following a path that seemed like survival at the time, that seemed like the only choice to escape our pain and our circumstances, finally got to a psychic change, as they call it in the big book, where our way wasn't working. There be dragons. We needed to change, as they say in AA, our whole frickin' life, only they don't say frickin'. Julio is one of those people. He went from a set of circumstances and a set of thinking and reactions that seemed totally viable to him to a place where he was never going to go back there. And in doing so, one man with a passion to help others over the course of, what is it, Julio, 22 years? Now has 300 dedicated members of his organization working in fields that I can't even wrap my mind around because it has become so immense. He's really bad at saying no, basically. He shared a video of a woman, part of their Exodus family, with me yesterday, who passed away recently. And she called Julio her Moses. And I think that's about as apt as it can get. Here's Julio Medina.
So my name is Julio Medina, and before I begin, I just want to thank Liz. Everyone has been thanking you, but really thank you for this opportunity and 10 years that you've been able to put together Way Out. And as a nonprofit leader, I know how challenging that could be. So just thank you for all that you are doing. I want to thank the speakers. Dr. Joanna, you can't pick on me no more. And thank you all. Thank you all for coming out. And in particular, Caroline, thank you for your introduction. But, close friend who just believes in the impossible. So thank you, Caroline, for always believing in the impossible. Before I begin, I'm watching the news, and I have two children, 14 and 16, Noah and Julia, and we've heard of the tragedy that just took place. So if you don't mind, can we just quick moment of silence for those 19 children and 2 teachers? Thank you. Good morning again. So I want to just talk this morning a little bit about Exodus and show you 2 videos that I think help encapsulate the work that we do. But more importantly, I want to be able to talk about prison, poverty, mental health, and how it kind of all relates. Many of us know that, but one of the bigger things I want to just mention, and I look out in the audience, and this is not to be offensive at all, but I can't talk about these 4 things if I don't talk about race, if I don't talk about how disproportionate it is for Black and Latinos to go into prison as it is for whites to go into prison. So I just must say that, so I hope no one is offended throughout this presentation. So I want to begin by saying there are no throwaway people. No matter where we come from, there are no throwaway people. But yet, in my communities in which I was raised, it's difficult for people to believe that. It's difficult because incarceration, poverty, mental health challenges, addiction seem to be the norm as opposed to an aberration. So let me just take a moment. I want to show a brief video to open as we start thinking about incarceration, mental health, and some of those challenges that exist, and particularly very specific in our communities.
You know, when it comes to addiction, addiction is a human issue. It's not a Black issue, it's not a white issue, it's a human issue. In terms of who's responsible or who suffers more, we all suffer. But I do see that race does play a part when it comes to who's pursued, who goes to prison, and how long they go to prison.
I used drugs when I was a teenager, went into prison at the age of 18. So although I spent 22 and a half years in prison, throughout that time, I've never really addressed the substance use. That doesn't happen inside, and it creates this revolving door because people go home, they haven't addressed it, which leads them back into crime, which leads them back into prison. They may find programs outside, but that really don't address all of the things that they're going through, like the trauma.
You know, we peel those layers back to be able to voice and to be able to talk about some of life's hardships that led them to addiction. And I think that does a lot of good for them.
I'm extremely shy because I have a serious past in regards to trauma, you know, child abuse and things of that nature, which kind of led me on the path for destruction. You know, I got shot 7 times and been placed in a wheelchair. I was paralyzed for like 24 years. My past experience helped me to identify with other clients. First of all, seeing them as humans.
We don't concentrate enough on some of the biopsychosocial aspects of what's going on in the community in terms of who's in the household, what influences are the children undergoing, and how can we serve that population before it actually gets out of control.
My father was a heroin addict. My mother wasn't. She had mental health issues. So being I was the only boy, I'm the youngest, I started being like a daredevil, if you will, right? So I'm jumping over the little hole in the fire escape. They got the little ladder and stuff. So I was jumping over the hole. And my little sister was a year older than me. I was 5, she was 6. She wanted to do the same thing. She jumped and she slipped. So I grew up, every time I got hit, I really zoned into, it had to be because, you know, I killed my sister. And that's what my mother said. You know, it was my fault. She said that it was my fault as to why she died. It got worse. You know, I remember getting hit with a bat one time. I remember getting stomped out. I stopped talking to people. I stopped sharing anything. I really was scared. I had to get away. You know, as a kid, I wanted to get away from my family, you know, but where am I going to go? And all around the area, I had people 10 years old, my age. At that time, they were strung out on dope. There's
a lot of pressure and stress, and they're on the streets, and they're trying to find their existence. They may make some mistakes.
At maybe like 8 or 9, they gave me a smoke of some marijuana, and I was running around the house thinking I was Superman. Trying to get out of that hell. None of that worked for me. I wound up in prison, uneducated.
And what happens is that it gets out of control. It goes from drug use to drug-related crimes, to incarceration, to long incarceration.
I was hurt, and that hurtness turns to rage. I did 20 years in prison. My addiction was me just trying to cover up all the pain and suffering that I kind of been through, and I wanted to find a way to numb the pain. I didn't know how to. So I never thought that they were going to let me out of prison. But just like I got myself into it, I can get myself out of it. I can change this. I just need another opportunity. So my gauge is Julio. You know, I look at Julio, and I was the one on the floor. You know, I was the one in the gutter, in the mud. And what did Julio, Diana, and all these beautiful people I met, they grabbed my hand and picked me up. So now when they picked me up, am I still dirty? Yeah. I had to purge myself, right? In order for you to see the real gentleman and man that I am.
There's so many people that are incarcerated that are drug-related crimes. If we can get rid of the drug-related, we might be halfway, through stemming the overall numbers of incarceration.
You know, at 48 years old, the first job I ever had is with Exodus. I don't care how old I'm gonna be, I'm gonna change. Now, at 53, still striving to achieve my goal. I'm here, I'm sober. I'm here, I'm changing people's lives. People wanted to hear the story, and I just shared it from my heart. If I can share my story, or if I can help somebody get out the feeling the way I was feeling, then this is something that I'm gonna do.
Thank you. So Divine is, I do want you to know, I don't know if they mentioned it, he is one of our CASETs, which in New York is a credentialed alcohol substance abuse counselor. So who better than him to now go out and try to support others in this process? And I think that, at Exodus, that's what we do. 85% of the staff at Exodus, it's 300 people on staff, 85% of the staff have been impacted by the justice system. For me, that's important because I want people to know, because of prison and because of the trauma of prison, we are not the worst moment of our lives. We are much more than that, and we still can contribute back to the community. In the United States, we incarcerate more people than any other country. Nothing to be proud of whatsoever. Despite making up only 5% of the global population, the U.S. has nearly 25% of the world's prison population. Since 1970, our incarcerated population has increased by 700%. I want to say that again. Since 1970, our incarcerated population has increased by 700%. Think about that. And who's being incarcerated? When we look at the prison as the solution, we're just creating a society, a world that says, we're going to solve all our problems by incarcerating folk. We're going to incarcerate our mental health. We're going to incarcerate so many people. And this is how we're going to get out of this problem. I was one of those people in prison. This is important to me because I served 12 years in prison. I was in some of the most horrific maximum security prisons in New York State. I was prosecuted by the Organized Crime Task Force of the Northern District, as well as 10 other people. I was considered the ringleader, and thus I was sentenced to life. What am I doing here? That's another story, and that's a miracle. During that 12 years, I think some of the most important things I've learned were during that 12-year span. To know the goodness that exists behind bars. You see, I had an opportunity to see people change. I had an opportunity to see people who could not read, who could not write, begin that process. I was a ABE instructor, adult basic education instructor. And I had a classroom full of people, full. And I'm teaching them the sounds. Sh, sh. The CH and the SH sounds. Think about, how did you understand what was happening at your trial if you couldn't read or write? How could you understand what was going on in this courtroom if you couldn't read or write. You know, there were some incidents in prison for me that were catalysts for change. You know, one of them was, I'm in Sing Sing. Some of you have heard about it, Sing Sing, yeah. So I was in Sing Sing for about 3 years. So now I'm like this change guy. I want to change the world. I want to do some stuff different. And there's this, so we know when people will be stabbed. Like those in the know kind of know, oh, shit, don't get next to this guy. And the main thing is not to get blood on you. Because if you get blood on you, the sergeants are going to call you in. They're going to think you got something to do with it. They're going to question you. So all you want to do is move out of the way. So sadly, and in no way do I mean to sound callous. I'm just telling you about the environment. So we knew someone was going to get stabbed, sadly. And back then, I didn't have a conscience. It was growing. And I just wanted to move out of the way, John, so the blood didn't get on me. But I couldn't. Something stopped me. And I don't know what it was. Call it God, a spirit, but something stopped me. And I'm screaming, top of my lungs, we got to stop this BS. We got to stop killing each other. Enough is enough. Now, mind you, that's not popular, especially not coming from me. Because sadly, I was one of the people prior who engaged in that behavior. But it was a moment that stopped me to recognize someone else's humanity. That is my brother. That we have to stop killing each other. And thus that began this total transformation for myself around what I'm going to do with my life. Now, mind you, I had life sentence, so maybe I'll never get out. But for me, whatever it was, I had to do the work inside. I had to tell the man there's hope. There's more that we can do to change the way the community looks at us. But I think some of the sad reality is sometimes people don't recognize change. So, 10 years I go to a parole board. I don't know if anybody parole board? Anybody knows what a parole board is? Didn't think so. It's 3 commissioners you sit in front, and you just kind of beg to try to get out of prison. That's what it comes down to. I would love to give you a more psychological Dr. Jonah view of it, but this is what it is. You sit in front of 3 people, and you try to beg to get out. So I sat in front of these 3 commissioners. And I'm like, I went to school, I'm doing this other stuff. And they're looking at your record. Then they ask, again, you have like 10 seconds to say something. Do you have anything to say? Of course, right? It's my way out. And I'm like, I understand who I was. I'm not this changed person before you. And I never forget the word I used. It was empower. I said, I'm now looking to empower the same communities I once destroyed. So they don't let me finish that sentence, by the way. Whoa, 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 whoa. This is a quote. You're a vulture. That's all you'll ever be is a vulture. You prey on the innocence of the communities with your drug dealing. So don't give me none of that psycho-babble BS. Close quote. Anybody knows what a hit is? No, I didn't think so. So, a hit is, you're not coming home. The parole board hits you, extends your sentence for 2 more years. So at that moment, I knew I was getting 2 more years. But it stuck with me. I'm more than a vulture. Think about a vulture. It kind of picks at dead animals on the side of the road. And that's how you see me. And for that, it was just monumental. Because if they saw me that way, who else viewed me that way? So that was one of the moments where you say, this will never happen to me again. But I want to tell you, everything goes through your mind. Suicide. I have to live in this place the rest of my life. Everything you can possibly think of at that moment goes through your mind. So I think part of the reason prison is kind of the last thing we look at is because we don't see the humanity in those that are inside. So, today I think one of the things I just want to make sure we leave with is we are beyond the worst moment of our lives. John, I don't want ever to see me as this former drug dealer that was the worst moment I could possibly be. I now run a nonprofit. We have 300 people on staff. I've sat on every president's reentry panel, the governor's reentry panel. I'm now the board interim chair, so I oversee our jails. I oversee the quality of our jails. But it's important that we understand the humanity that goes along with it. Excuse me. Just get a little emotional when we talk about prison. Let me talk about mental health. I heard, Liz, you talked about 1 in 5 in prison. 60% have a mental health disorder. 60% of the folk inside have a mental health disorder. About 30% are homeless. So we are incarcerating, not treating mental health. We're not treating addiction. We're not treating homelessness. We're criminalizing it as a country. The mental health is severe. And if you don't have mental health going in, you will have it going out. I lived in a cell. You got to touch both walls. I lived in that space for 12 years. So my life, I'm not sure, I may need an evaluation or something, because I'm not sure I'm more there after this, but this was my existence for 12 years on each side. And then you're released and they want you to be normal. They want you to say, oh, it's okay. No reason for you to ever commit another crime. So we have over 500,000 people estimated to be homeless. 143,000 of them have been arrested. So our homeless population is our criminal population. And I think when we look at some of this, and we look at some of these statistics, it talks about the pettiness of the crimes, right? We're talking about not paying fines. In New York is, jumping over the train, turnstile. Very petty crimes. And people go to jail for this. Our homeless population goes to jail for this. So we've criminalized the homeless, just as we've criminalized mental health, just as we've criminalized poverty. And I think that's something we should all tell ourselves, what can we do to make a difference? Now, it may not touch some of the communities, it probably didn't touch Aspen. No, I get it. This is New York City, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. So hopefully we can start thinking about what are some of the things we can do to help at least begin to change the narrative about how we talk about people that have been justice impacted. I want to go to this newspaper. This is some of the mental health statistics. So during the crack epidemic, I don't know if you remember those words, right? Super predators, mothers who are smoking crack and having children. They're gonna breed this new generation of super predators. And I think the sad narrative when we frame this, that was being said for people of color. Right? The super predator was for people of color. This was the articles, and there was a mother, now it changes when it gets into our suburban communities. The cost of addiction, right? The disease of addiction. Different picture. There's different ways we could treat addiction. This is what addiction looks like. It looks like us. So this is okay. Let's find ways to help. But the previous slide geared towards black and brown people, lock them up. And they're breeding a new generation of super predators. These are things we should all be thinking about. Racial implications. I think some of this tells the story itself when we think about race. When I was in prison, 90% of everybody I was around was black and brown. Small population of white, Asian, and other nationalities. What does this tell us about our country? Sometimes doing this work, being in the midst of this every single day, watching how easy it is to get drugs, to have it so accessible, we have to start telling ourselves, why are we targeting inner city communities, people of color in particular, and how do we begin to change that narrative? What are some of the things we can do to change that? And I think that's just an extremely important aspect of this work. There are not horrific people in prison. You probably see the news clip of the 17-year-old smiling, smirking, right? And you're like, good for you. I saw that 17-year-old when he was 23, when he got his GED, when the lights start coming on. And he's like, holy shit, I'm gonna be here for the next 20 years of my life? I got to see that kid. And that kid may never come home again. But no one is talking about the circumstances that brought him to prison. What we look at is the crime. No one is talking about single-parent household. In that single-parent household, mother was on drugs. No one is talking about all the conditions, the lack of education, the inferior schools. That's okay. Just whatever you do, don't commit a crime. Again, I think it's important for us to look at that. It's important for us to see that. It's important for us to understand some of the traumatic events that happen in one's life and ask ourselves, how do we begin to stem the next generation so that doesn't happen? What are some of the things we can do to create a workforce, to create some equity in the communities that tell us, you know what? You are someone. You are valued. We believe in you. That's important. New York State has 35,000 people in their prison system. We have about 5,400 in our jail. Each one of them if you go into the prison and you ask someone, yo, man, if you had an alternative, what would you do? Man, I'll start all over again. You know what? I'll be a better father. No one ever says, I couldn't wait to come to prison. You won't never hear anyone say that. You go in these communities and they'll tell you, man, I just wish I had a better opportunity. I wish my mom's was there. You know, we run a bunch of groups I'll tell you about in a minute. But we have one group we run. And we do this music, we do studio time, do a lot of other things to stop gang intervention. So we take one of the kids from the community, 12 years old. We call his mother, one of the counselors calls his mother, say, hey, we're going to take him on a trip. We'll bring him back tonight, blah, 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 blah. She's like, okay, fine. The following week, we call the same mother. Hey, we're taking him on a trip. She's like, you still got my son? Think about that. She did not give a fuck about her son for 7 days. For 7 days, she did not care where he was at. She did not see him. He was home every night. And this is the challenges that we face in our communities. These are some of the things that we're trying to change, because it's happening at such a young age that we have to figure out what are some of the pieces we could put in place so our young people can be successful. Now, how the chances and the likelihood of this kid going to prison? No one is in the house. No one is in the house. He has to feed himself. Every day he has to go out, steal, whatever he does. Every day he has to do the same thing. So I just think it's important, again, that sometimes we talk about the end result. Oh, look at this guy, they shouldn't have committed that crime. And maybe we can go upstream and figure out what's happening here. I want to show you another video. This woman's name is Charlene, and I think the video will speak for itself.
I developed a desire for human disaster since I was a kid because of the things that I was exposed to.
So when I went to prison, my daughter was just about to turn 2, and there was a part of me that wanted to give up my rights because I didn't feel like I deserved to be a mother. I was in sick places. I was around a lot of sick people, you know. Unfortunately, when you don't know any better, you don't do better. I wanted to be bad. I wanted to be abused. I wanted to run the streets because this is what I saw my mother doing. My mother would abuse me physically. I remember being 6, 7, and she split my head open, split my eyebrow open. I was bleeding. She tied my hands behind my back with tape. She'd take my hands, my mouth, and my feet, and she put me in the closet. And I think it was about a day and a half, maybe 2 days. So when she took me out of the closet, she took the tape off of me and washed me up. And then my mother started molesting me. She made me do things to her I wasn't supposed to. Or I would have to kneel on rice. And if I would take a break, she'll make me get back up on my knees again for a couple more hours until she was ready for me to come back again. Then my mother had a boyfriend. He started molesting me, he raped me, you know, in between the both of them. And then she would leave me with him and come back a week later, and I would be tormented. My mother came to pick me up, and the babysitter says to my mother, you know, your daughter's in a lot of pain, you need to take her to the hospital. She whooped me so bad. You better not say nothing. She just kept beating me. I don't know why, but I loved my mother so much. She could never do no wrong in my eyes. I just said, Mommy, please don't leave me. Eventually, I was taken from her. The foster care system let me down. I ended up pregnant from a counselor. He was like, you gotta go, because if I lose my family, I'm gonna kill you. I thought it was all my fault. Even my mother, I just wanted her to love me. I started to resent humans. I really did. So I was numbing myself. I learned to respect myself and love myself in prison. I surrendered. I asked for forgiveness. Help me. Help me be a better mother. Help me. When I got locked up, my daughter went through separation anxiety. She started pulling all her hair out and scratching her face. And I knew that she would resent me for a long time, because who is this lady coming home from prison taking me from all I know? She was like, go back to prison, I hate you. So I wanted to give up there and say, go live with your grandmother. Big Exodus, they would hear me. And I'm like, I can't do this. I'm not ready, I can't. And they're like, yes, you can. I was thankful for Exodus because they've been paying for therapy for my daughter and I. I acquired the strength, the class, the etiquette. So one day, I'm getting my daughter ready for school. And she goes, I'm not mad at you anymore. So I said, what are you talking about? I was mad that you left me. She goes, but now I understand. You went to prison because it was a mistake. I was just afraid of losing you again.
So we run something called the Trauma Center, the Center for Trauma Innovation, and this is a 4-part series of different people on the staff who talk about some of the trauma they've been through. Kathleen runs our Center for Trauma Innovation. She's actually one of the vice presidents, and the work that she's doing is part of this work that we're talking about and trying to heal the staff at Exodus. When we first started talking about trauma and bringing trauma into Exodus, this trauma-informed organization, I'm like, no, hell no, I don't want to do that. Everybody's going to be crying every day. We ain't going to get nowhere, Why we want to do that for? We know we all traumatized, The lives we live, so I didn't want to do it. So they convinced me to do this one session. Like, come on, man, just do this one session, I go in the session, I'm angry anyway, I don't want to do it. I'm the first one, of course, they call on. And I'm like, oh, my mom, But the impact and my ignorance, not knowing, how do we begin to really heal? What are some of the things that we need to do? And I think our trauma is just a little different because of the prison experience and the brutality that we see every day in that prison experience. It kind of, for us, it's just a little different. So I just think it's important, if I could leave you with a message around when we think about mental health, when we think about poverty, when we think about incarceration, look around and see who's going in there. Look around and figure out, how do I help? We may not look like you, may not come from the same communities you do, but we're all part of the human family, right? And I think we have to figure out ways on how do we help each other overcome Charlene's trauma, Divine, and so many of us at Exodus and throughout the country, I think, is figuring that out. And let me close on this note because, we really are not the worst moment of our lives. And I want you to understand that, and I really want you to leave with that who I was as a kid is not who I am today. It's a lived experience that I definitely go through. And so many people have changed their lives. And the Charlenes of the world need support. And it's important that we find ways to support any trauma centers, any reentry programs that we can. I want to close with a note to Caroline, since she likes to embarrass me. I think we met, 20 years ago. I think she heard me on the radio. I think she said, NPR, you heard me on the radio. And like, okay, I got to meet this guy, which was great because we've been in contact ever since. And she's helped build out this trauma center. And she's helped build out a music studio. And she's helped build out so much of what we're doing in New York City. So one day, Kathleen and I are talking, and it's like, Caroline is this angel, Julio, that I'm like, nah, she's cool. I know her, walks on the beach, we chill. She said, no, really. Think of one funder who never asked for our financial audits, our 990s, who never visited Exodus, but still just unconditionally supports us. Every fund I got, let me see let me see your audit. Wow, you bought a pencil. You shouldn't have bought that pencil last, Not a question is asked. Just says do the work. So I'm grateful to you, Caroline, to A Way Out, because all this doesn't happen without your support. So thank you all. Wonderful opportunity.
Any questions or answers for Julio?
Oops.
Any questions until we answer?
Yes.
I had to say, it was so moving. My family is Swedish, and I am sure you've looked around the world. You go to Sweden, you go to Norway, they are incarcerated, and the cells are decorated from IKEA. People lay in the sun, and so many people in this country will talk about the fact that they're soft on crime. No, they're smart on crime.
That's right.
They are smart on crime. These people will join society again one day. I don't have a question as much as I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. But we need to get to a place in the great United States of America to say we do not have all the answers. We are not always the best. And we need to look at the rest of the world and see what works, because this is a shame. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Man, I appreciate the fact that you're bringing awareness to the fact that you cannot arrest yourself out of addiction. You cannot arrest yourself out of mental illness. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you very much. You started by saying I don't want to offend anyone. And I want to invite people, not you, but I want to invite people to be open to being offended, because this is offensive. It's offensive that private prisons. It's offensive that private prisons in the United States make over $2 billion a year in profit on the back of human beings who are suffering. So thank you for the work you're doing. Keep offending people, please.
Thank you.
Okay, give me a second. I just want to say thank you very much as well. I was a crackhead. I was a meth head. I did not wake up, as a child and say, I hope to be addicted to anything or be imprisoned or lose my children. And so I really appreciate your presentation on that and how we can bring awareness to the human being and where they come from and what's happened, not what they've done or who they are at this moment. And I also am I have a landscaping company, and I work to help people coming out of treatment centers or out of prison or off the streets to have work and re-transition into the world as well. So, but I really appreciate you coming here and sharing this and being offensive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Julio, it kind of blows my mind. I just want you to tell us, those still who think that incarceration is the answer to these problems, what does it cost per prisoner per year?
So in different states, it changes. In New York City, in our jail, it costs $500,000 to jail one person for the year. I want to say that again. In New York City, in our jail, it costs $500,000 per person in that jail. And each state, of course, will change, you know, your prices will change, but yeah, New York was one of the most highest cost facilities for a small jail in the country. But again, throughout the states, you'll see things that mirror those prices. So thank you, Cal.
I noticed on the bottom of your biography, Julio, poverty plays a role in the justice system today. You've touched on that. As a former public defender, I remember a cartoon I saw probably 15 years ago, and it's not a question, it just sort of brings it again to the forefront. A lawyer sitting at a desk, a client across from him, and he says, "You have a great case. How much justice can you afford?" And
Thank you.
money plays a part in the legal system.
Yes, yes, it does. It does.
Thank you. Truly impactful stuff. Born and raised in Queens. I'm a New Yorker. Been here about 15 years. But my question is, sorry. How do we get our communities to build capital, to be progressive, to work with these nonprofits, to have that exposure? You know, Aspen is a small community. I think we're very progressive, but there's always a need for more. How do we do that here locally?
So I'm going to say, you know, a way out. It could be a perfect, like, how do we really look at nonprofits? Maybe there's opportunities to volunteer. There's different ways to support. I'm not sure what legislation looks like out here, but can we begin changing some of the legislation that incarcerates so quickly? And get to know the folk. I think get to know the folk. I think, you know, I believe in law enforcement. I'm not sure. So, okay, so how do we, so you get to see the other side of that, right? You get to see the other side. I get to see the person when they're getting out and what happened, that change throughout. And I think it's important, maybe there's a way you can educate the department as well to say, you know, again, whatever that addiction is, whatever these other factors are that's bringing that person into custody, there's someone more. That's a father, that's a mother, that's a child, that's an uncle, probably employed, just not looking at that person as this person in cuffs. I think, you know, begin that educational process could be helpful as well. Thank you. Queens, New York.
Hi, over here. What's the one thing that has shifted political will that you know, on a national level, on a state level, that you've seen or would believe in will make a big difference?
You know, I want to say, you know, we've seen some progressive stuff happening. While you know, some of the jails, they're lowering their population, their prison population. They're finding alternatives to incarceration. And I would love to believe that the moral pendulum has swung in the direction of forgiveness. But the bottom line is cost. It costs too much for states to continue to operate at this pace. So, you know, if we can do anything at all, it's kind of making sure that those reforms don't change. You know, we had some bail reform stuff in New York City that's quickly changing. You know, you highlight the one case of someone who's out on bail who commits another crime and now all suffer. So I just think it's important to continue to be progressive, that allow people to know as the political winds shift. I mean, sadly, again, it's about jails just cost too much to operate at this capacity, just to make sure they don't swing it back. I think that's it. It might be easier to just.
I know.
Her as well. Oh, come on.
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank you for everything. You and I had a chance to talk last night, and as a New Yorker, I used to bring meetings to Rikers and saw it firsthand. I live in Denver now. I don't live up here in Aspen, and we're seeing something very similar. There's a group of us, actually, they're starting to lobby. I work for a detox, and we're really angry with the new laws that are coming in for fentanyl. It's not about it being a crime. It's about how do you get people into recovery and get them onto the right path. My real question is here, how do we bring what you're doing and start something like that in Denver? I have a bunch of people that I think would be really behind this, including in the mental health field as well. We would love to see something start here. So tell me how we help.
Good question. I'd love to figure that out, how we can do that. I'd love to find a way to figure that out. But I was watching the news and I saw the criminalization of fentanyl now, 1 gram or something. Not knowing that you bought it, you don't know what's in it. But so yes, and I think advocacy is going to be important. How do we push back on some of these things that are happening? Yeah. I think there was this woman right here.
I'm wondering if you've seen, or do you see, and we've kind of been touching on it, a change in the way our court systems work. I personally have experienced through a daughter of mine who has been homeless for several years, who, like many homeless people, get in trouble with the law. And my experience is that they lose their home, they lose their job, they lose their means of transportation, they lose their support group that might be positive, they lose everything. And they go into the court system, and if they can't use anything but a public defender, they get pushed back, they get a new public defender, they get pushed back, they accumulate court fees, they can't pay court fees because they don't have a job, they can't get a job because they probably have a felony or a warrant. I mean, it's like a vicious circle. If they get on probation, if they actually get sentenced, which I haven't experienced that yet, but they get on probation and they mess up once, they're back in jail. And I'm not saying these people shouldn't be held accountable for crimes if they're guilty, but typically the crimes are a result of addiction for whatever reason they took that path. Do you see any hope of the courts being kinder rather than punishing people for a disease?
Yeah, I think it'll have to be collective somehow, you know, with the courts and the treatment centers and the nonprofits. How do you come to a collective? You know, in Brooklyn, we have a court that's actually a mental health court. So although there's crimes that happen, and since we have a mental health center, they will refer at the court, they'll be sentenced to Exodus. Because, you know, there's, in Brooklyn, we have a district attorney, Eric Gonzalez, that's somewhat progressive compared to everyone else. And I think, you know, prosecutors have to understand what their role is. And I think that's up to us to tell them that. It's not, you know, what's your record or, you know, on how many convictions you can get. But, you know, what are the alternatives? You have to see hope in this person before you. And what are some of the alternatives that we have in our community that can help this person through those supports? So I think it's, you know, we're still, ways from the court saying, wow, we see this, and not see the felony. I haven't seen them take all those things into consideration during sentencing. And usually they don't have time to take it into consideration, considering, as you know, the courts are so backlogged. Yeah.
Thank you.
I know that probably didn't provide any hope, but.
building off from the previous question, do you have any ideas, either just vague or very specific, on how to change the cultural attitudes towards addiction and trauma such that these factors are taken into account? Because I agree with you that nothing's going to happen until people realize, and we can't really force them to realize. They are going to have to realize themselves. Is there any hope for that, or any way that can happen?
I mean, again, I think we have to be in progressive communities, progressive states, for some of this stuff to happen, for people to really invest in mental health. I remember when mental health, I think Dr. Joanna was talking about when we started criminalizing in the 70s or something, all the mental health, they closed all the mental health centers in New York. So everybody went to prison, right? Because we just continue to criminalize that. But I think if we, in a progressive space where we get our legislators, where we're really putting pressure, we are a voting public, and every politician needs our vote. So if we're voting to let's get tougher, then that's what we want. So I think it's important for all of us to be educated for that process to begin. Yes.
You said you wanted to empower communities through your work, and I'm wondering how you decide in your organization how much resourcing to spend doing that on the ground versus trying to raise awareness and change people's minds who are influencing the issue but not necessarily feeling the impact of it.
Yeah. We have a policy team that's actually their job, to go to city council. So in New York, we got a city council, and we got to pass stuff by them first. So they go to the city council, we lobby every politician. It's a strong group in New York. We have the right to vote. So meaning once you're released in New York, your right is automatically restored. So we're building a coalition of folk to vote in one block. And it begins to change the narrative. There was a district attorney's race in Manhattan. And the 7 district attorneys that ran for office all had to come to Exodus and meet with us. What are you going to do? What is your agenda if you want our vote? So I think I think we have to spend capital, lobbying for what we're looking for. Because if not, this thing goes underground again. So no, really important topic. And yes, we have a lobbying arm, and probably one of the most important arms in the organization. That's it. Thank you.